We're live over there on Rockfin. All of the bigots watching on Rockfin, they can see us now. YouTube can see us now. Nickita. Fantastic. Nickita was just telling me, as you can see in the title, Nickita is a, oops, excuse me. Okay, I think we should be good now. Sorry, I think the audio's good. Can we do a sound check for you, please, Nickita?
Yeah, hello, hello, hello.
Beautiful. We're
Boom, boom,
good.
boom.
We are good. All right. So we're live on Rockfin. We're live on YouTube. I'm talking to midwife. Do you use the word doula?
I'm a doula. So
Okay.
I'm a natural birth practitioner. I started off in midwifery, but I'm now a natural birth practitioner.
All right. So yeah, can you explain to me what the heck the difference is between a midwife and a doula? Because I kind of use them interchangeably. I guess that's not right.
Well, I think it's quite different depending where you live, but in the UK, certainly, a midwife is a clinical practitioner. They're trained in medical services, and they attend births. We do the same, but we don't do anything clinical. We are experts in natural birth, in birth physiology, and we are there to support women emotionally and practically. And for the most part, birth won't need any intervention at all. Not that most people realize that because of all the horror stories you hear, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, so I'm there to provide people with evidence-based information to make an informed decision about their birth. And I know a lot about it. And yeah, I'm just there through the whole pregnancy. So they've got, continuity of carer there throughout the birth and postnatal period, or as you say, postpartum, if they want it.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Nickita and what she does, if you check out the description, both on YouTube and on Rockfin, there's a link. You're a musician as well, right?
I am. I'm a singer-songwriter. Yes.
All right. So we got your song linked below. The first link is to her song, and then also you can check out her website, where I think from there you'll be able to access her on Telegram, YouTube. You have a fantastic podcast that you can also find on YouTube. What is that called again? Your podcast?
It's when push comes to shove. So if you just go to the website, whenpushcomestosshove.co.uk, everything's there. You can click straight on the homepage. You've got YouTube, Spotify, everything, and our Telegram channel. Please join that. It's becoming an amazing community of like-minded people. But as Tristan just said, I also released a song called Breathe Again, and it's just to spread awareness of autonomy and empowering women in birth. And it doesn't have to be this huge disaster that you hear in the mainstream media, because it's not. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful video. So check it out. It's like midwives singing along to the chorus. There's beautiful footage of women who've just given birth. I'm in it. You can see both my births in it if you can spot me. I look very different. So check it out.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So speaking of traumatic events, and you were just telling me right before we got live here that you actually broke your back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so insane. Was this during, you've been doing this for like at least 10, 15 years, right? How long have you been doing what you do?
12 years. Yeah.
12 years.
It was 2007. I broke my back on Valentine's Day. So I went horse riding with my friend, and I was riding a horse I didn't know. I was cocky, stupid, and I was galloping where I shouldn't be.
I feel 10 feet
I
tall
think a
right
deer
now,
must have spooked
and
the
strong
horse.
as an ox.
And it bucked, and I sat the buck, and I just didn't expect it to do it again. And I went over its head, and there was a fallen tree, and I landed, went bang on the tree, and then I don't remember much. I remember coming to, and I couldn't feel my legs, but the pain was undescribable, and all I could think of was Christopher Reeve. I thought, I've had it, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get an ambulance to me because of where I was. I was in very muddy terrain, and then they tried to land an air ambulance. They couldn't do that because of where I was. So they got a National Trust Land Rover, like a Ranger, and they put me on the back of the Range Rover, whatever it was, and took me to the ambulance. And I was lucky, I think, because the ground was February, so the ground was kind of freezing over, and it saved me because it stopped me from swelling. But they took me into hospital, and I was laying there on a gurney for ages. My dad was there, and he thought I was going insane. I was going, get the bugs out of me, get the bugs out of me. And he's like, yeah, you're all right. And he thought it was because I was on breathing gas and air, and they gave me morphine and whatever. And they had to cut my jodhpurs off, and there were bugs inside me because I'd been laying on the ground for so long.
Wow.
And then they wheeled me into the x-ray, and they smashed the gurney into the wall. I was like, it's so painful. But shortly afterwards, I found out I'd broken L1, L2, and T12. They weren't sure about my recovery, what was going to happen. I was in hospital for a fair amount of time, but I didn't have to have any surgery, and they put me in this back brace. But I was up and walking within a month because I thought, this is boring. I'm not doing this. I can't live like this. I think I just willed myself back into health.
Did they tell you like you may never walk again? I mean, what kind of recovery arc did they present?
Yeah, they said they didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't know the extent of the damage. I was in, so I was pretty freaked out. And then I freaked myself out more because I spent the rest of my time recovering watching a box set of House.
Oh man, so wow. So I can imagine, with such a traumatic experience in the medical system that perhaps this maybe led you to a certain level of skepticism about the procedures in hospitals and the capability of them to actually help people in traumatic injuries.
I had a few questions, yeah. And then I had my first baby 13 years ago, and I wasn't clued up at all. I had no idea I was allowed to decline interventions. And long story short, I was 40 weeks plus 10 days, and they said, well, you're overdue, you've got to be induced. And I was like, oh, do I? So in I went, and bloody hell, it was awful. I had a 23-hour and 20-minute labor. Oh yeah, and they were fussing about me giving birth naturally because of my broken back, and instinctually I was like, nah, she'll be all right.
When you say naturally, you mean without drugs, without epidural?
But they thought the baby would harm my back because it was so soon after the event. They were worried there'd be issues, but I was like, no, don't worry about that. I've got this. Mm-hmm. And then because they gave me syntocin, or in America they call it Pitocin, this drug to induce labor, it makes your contractions very strong, close together, and very, very painful. So I asked for an epidural. But because of my broken back, and I think the swelling, the scar tissue, it didn't work. It made my legs numb, but I could feel everything else. And I said, can you take it out of my back? I don't want it anymore. I want to move around. They go, no, you stay there. I'm on my back. Of course I'm not going to progress because the epidural is going to slow your labor down. Then they up the induction drug. They up the Synto. And then what ends up happening, and this happens a lot, by the way, is that it deprives oxygen to the placenta. So it compromises the oxygen flow. The baby goes into distress, and then they've got to give you either an instrumental delivery emergency or a cesarean section. Luckily, I had a vaginal birth, but I would never call it natural. And out she came with a ventouse vacuum. And they want you to thank them for saving a baby, which they cause that intervention in the first place in this cascade of events. But people don't know about the birth physiology. If you interfere with a woman giving birth, you're going to have problems. I always say to people, if a well-meaning scientist wanted to study how cats give birth, for example, they would have to be studied in a lab environment, wouldn't they? So there'd be bright lights, the cat would feel observed, poking about. They would have to conclude in that study that cats are not able to give birth naturally for the most part.
Okay.
But the only reason that would happen is because it's in a clinical setting. And a wonderful woman I work with, Beverly Beach, and she wrote a book called Am I Allowed? And she's just been an activist for 40 years. She's incredible. She once had a discussion with an obstetrician, and he said, there is nothing you can tell me that I don't know about birth. And she said, Mr. whatever your name is, have you passed a baby through your vagina? And he was like, no. And she said, well, you cannot understand the behavior of birds by observing them in a zoo. And I thought, bam, of course not. Because if women are interfered with, and they release adrenaline during labor, it's going to stop oxytocin. And oxytocin is your key hormone to make your labor progress. And if you release adrenaline, it will stop it in its tracks. And what stimulates adrenaline? Bright lights, feelings of being observed, strangers, people putting their hand in your vagina.
Oh.
Where'd you get all that?
Yeah.
The hospital, you know? But if women understand, for the most part, that their body is going to work perfectly, the body's not going to fail you, but your attendance and your environment certainly can. There are three main reasons, in my experience, that birth goes wrong. Poverty, which I hope anyone watching is not in that bracket, because there's malnutrition as a problem there. And you're living in overcrowded environments, you know, bacteria will spread and there may be an issue. The second one is there is a genuine medical problem. You may be unwell, your baby may be unwell, but the third and the most common reason for birth going wrong is unnecessary medical intervention. I see it all the time.
Wow. Well, when did it become normalized for childbirth to be seen as just like a standard medical procedure, or a medical procedure to be standardized, right? When did this happen?
Well, in the last century. I mean, it's brand new. I mean, people talk about the concept of free birth or unassisted birth as mental and crazy and irresponsible. But free birth is older than this medicalized rubbish. I mean, look.
Well, why do you hate science so much? I mean, why do you hate progress, and why are you so bigoted towards science? I mean, you know, there's this assumption that it's like everything we have in the medical system is some sort of great progressive thing, that everything's just getting better and better. I mean, that seems. Would you push back against such rhetoric as that?
Yes, I bloody would. And I'll tell you why, right? Right, first of all, I'm not stupid. I know that there will be a handful of women that will need help giving birth, okay? It's so rare, but it does happen. And according to the World Health Organization, I'm sure no one watching is a fan of them, but less than 10% of women will actually need intervention. But here's the thing. If you have a fleeting glance in obstetrics, we know one thing: we don't know enough. So in the 30s, they were giving women x-rays to check the size of their pelvises. And then babies were born with cancer. So they stopped doing that. And then, of course, we all remember thalidomide, what happened there. So they stopped doing that. Then in the 90s, they were using a drug called Cytotec to induce labor with women who've had a previous cesarean section. And that ended up in thousands of dead babies and ruptured uteruses. So they stopped doing that. And guess what we've got now? I don't need to mention it, what's going to happen there. But here's the thing, right? We know one thing: we don't know enough. And if you want to go forward in birth, you got to go back. This is a physiological process. What next? We've got to go to hospital to have a poo. It's so ridiculous.
Well, I mean, depends on who you ask. If the World Economic Forum has their way, you know, I mean, if some of these technocrats have their way, yes, you will need to go to the hospital to have a poo, to urinate, for insemination when everybody's properly sterilized by some of the things that we're doing to people right now. I mean, it does seem like it's going in that direction, right? Everything is medicalized.
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be. I mean, Michel Audin, who's a French obstetrician, he's an incredible man. He says if we carry on the way we are going to evolve to lose the ability to give birth eventually. And I don't know if you guys have seen this film, but if you haven't, check it out. Go on Amazon and watch a film called Microbirth. So I discuss a lot about the human microbiome and how important it is. And I'm sure you've spoken to Phil about this, et cetera, et cetera. But we are really being compromised here with the microbiome, and it's how we're giving birth. So they've discovered that when they ask the question, why are we so ill as a nation? Why are we getting so ill? And they've come to with this hypothesis that it's because of the growing rate of cesarean section rate. Because if a baby is born by a cesarean section, they're not seeded with that gut bacteria, the human microbiome. And they've also discovered if a baby is born by C-section and they don't receive that seeding, it doesn't matter if they grow up to have a vaginal birth themselves. They can't pass it on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, you know, there's things you can do about diet, etc., fixing a leaky gut, and also skin to skin is essential to see the baby, and breastfeeding is so important. That needs to be spoken about more. It's literally liquid gold. Like
Is it soy? Wouldn't soy milk be better though? I mean, come on, it's less. It's more vegan, you know.
No. Breast milk is amazing. If your baby has a temperature, your breast milk will change in temperature according to what the baby needs.
Wow.
If your baby's got a cold, you express the milk, write cold on it, stick it in the freezer, and you can use that later on. Because the microbiome will change. Your breast milk will change according to what your baby needs. It's incredible stuff. People have been using it and buying it online to cure COVID. My baby had COVID, whatever it is that's going around at the moment, and she just laid there like a slug for about 3 days, and then she was like, "Oh, I'm fine." And she was 5 months old, and then it knocked me out for ages. And I actually had my own breast milk, gave me a boost, because my body was producing milk to sort out whatever virus she had. So I thought, I'll have some of that. Right stuff.
That's a weird feat. Like, how are you able to? You got a really good neck flexibility. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I mean that's incredible. It's amazing how much just these normal natural things that human beings do are pathologized, right? Like breastfeeding is somehow offensive to some people, right? You know, breastfeeding in public, this is somehow sexualized or something like that. From all these pervert coomers in the world can't divorce any body contact from sexual acts, but. It's just it's everything is pathologized now, right? Even the desire to have a home birth is seen as something that's like dangerous, right? I actually we got a tip over here from ELC on Rockfin. Thank you very much, ELC. This is a really good question that we're gonna ask Nickita right here. And if you guys are watching on Rockfin, make sure to support via those tips. Make sure to share the videos, like the videos. And if you're watching on YouTube, we probably got about 5 minutes left of kind of biting our tongue here. Keep it within the ever-shifting Orwellian boundaries of YouTube. What do you call it? Terms of service, which are never really properly elucidated and are constantly shifting and changing. And we're going to be going over exclusively to Rockfin. The link is in the description. The link is also in the live chat. Watch on Rockfin for free, especially while we're live here. I think we'll keep this video up for Rockfin for free for as long as we're over there on Rockfin, where there's zero censorship, where we can say what we want, talk about what we want. But on Rockfin, ELC says, question for Nickita. A common argument against natural birth I see people using is pointing to the higher rates of infant mortality in pre-modern times. How do you see this, and how would you respond to this common argument? The babies all die during home births, and the hospitals have improved our situation with birth so much.
Okay, so that's a very good question. So there used to be a lot of infant death, that's true. And before, certainly in the UK, before the NHS was about, there was quite a lot of infant mortality. There was what we call childbed fever. And that was before we understood more about bacteria and what happened then. But we've also got to remember there was so much more poverty. And what did I just say earlier about common reasons for problems during pregnancy? Now, there is a book, and I'm so sorry, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I will look it up in a minute. It's about indigenous tribes around the world and ancient cultures and their infant and maternal mortality rate. And it's next to zero. If you look at like indigenous tribes that are healthy and they are well nourished, there's no stillbirth or anything like that. It's so seldom happens.
Weston Price's book talks a little bit about this. It's not exclusively about this, but Dr. Weston A. Price, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, talks about how important nutrition is for having a properly formed birth canal in the woman, right? Like women who are malnourished and who are focusing on a grain-based diet, like this modern ultra-processed diet that we see. You compare then with other members of their family who were eating their natural diet, so-called natural, but their ancestral diet that their grandparents ate before contact with what he called like the foods of commerce that will displace these animal foods that were highly prized for fertility. And women in the Western world have a narrowing birth canal even, and then of course dental problems as well. So yeah, I mean, this is something that's documented, I guess, from many different angles. We got a little delay there, sorry.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge aspect. Yeah, for sure. But the infant mortality rate, and certainly in the UK, used to be very high. And I think what people get a bit confused about, they think cesareans are the answer. It should be a last resort. The problem is cesarean sections have got safer. over the years. So they used to do a vertical incision, and it would take a very long time to get the baby out safely, and it was very risky. But now they've kind of mastered the C-section process. It's safer. So they're saying it's an alternative, but it is not an alternative. The consequences of a cesarean section can be awful. I mean, forget the bonding issue, because you haven't produced all the hormones that you're meant to when you're in lateral labor. Mums can have bonding issues, breastfeeding issues. All babies born by C-section are born with something called wet lung, because their lungs haven't had a good squeeze through the birth canal, and they're far more likely to have respiratory problems. C-section babies have got issues with asthma, eczema, allergic to everything. This is more common in C-section babies, should I add. But I'm sure this is a trigger for a lot of women, and I really want to add, this is not meant to offend anyone at all, because I've had a horrible birth, and it was just disgusting, my first one, and I'd never want anyone to go through that. But if you really do need a C-section, or indeed you want one, because we are all about empowering you to choose, not to bully you into a certain type of birth, there are things you can do to ensure seeding. So you can roll up a gauze like a tampon before you go and have your cesarean operation, put it in your vagina, and then when the baby's born, take it out and then rub it around its mouth and inside its mouth. It can really help seeding. So, when push comes to shove was created to empower women, and I'm sick of the system we've got worldwide. So I'm trying to offer you a new system where if you want to still go and give birth in hospital, cool, we can help you with that. We can advocate for you. We can help you navigate that system. But if you want to birth off grid, we can do that too. We can help you. We've got birth practitioners everywhere, and it's becoming worldwide. We just want to offer you an empowering birth journey. So many women hand over their birth. Don't do that. It's the most sacred moment of your life. But people don't want responsibility. But we're here to go, look, we're not telling you what to do. What do you want? Here's information to make an informed decision. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just because my preference is home birth, it doesn't mean to say yours has to be. My last baby was born in my living room at home in under 3 hours. It was great. It was easy peasy, and it weren't painful. I would not be able to describe to my birth as painful. It was just intense. But because I felt so safe and I was so in touch with my body, it just felt amazing. And I wanted to do it again straight after.
Right away?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were really blessed to have two very smooth births, and they were both at home. The second one was completely unassisted, and so it's something that is dear to our hearts. I'm not saying everybody should do that or every woman is ready for that, but I think you make a lot of really good points there as well about we're talking about these changes in the medicalization of birth, how this was never considered a medical procedure, right? I mean, this was never considered something that you need intervention with. And it's funny, at the beginning you said that one of the biggest causes of birth trauma or issues during birth or even death is intervention. so it seems like maybe we're according to what you said there. Yeah.
Without a doubt, it plays a huge role. So if you think about any physiological process, I always say to women, who do you want watching you if you're going for a poo? I can't imagine it'll be many people. It's a very private moment, and your oxytocin will facilitate that. It's a very, very shy hormone. And if you feel observed, it will stop. I mean, women's cervixes can close back up. And oh God, these vaginal exams that they make women have, of course, there are sometimes they may be necessary, but to use them as standard procedure when a woman walks into the hospital is outrageous. Women need to know that they've got just as much right to put their fingers inside their midwife or doctor as the doctor does them. You do not have to have a vaginal exam, because it can cause anxiety, especially with women that have been abused, or anyone for that matter. It's not nice. You don't want a stranger doing that, or anyone. It's not medical to do that. Sorry, it's not natural. Sorry, it's a medical procedure. It feels very intrusive. If you want one, have one, but you don't have to. You can decline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it seems like a lot of the things that are standardized are actually making it a more difficult process, making the birth process more likely to go awry. And this normalization of cesarean sections too. Yeah, I didn't realize that there have been such advances in the way that we do C-sections. Not we, I'm not performing these things. I don't identify with the medical system, but I mean, this is something that I guess would greatly increase the survival rates with, especially being so often used, the C-section. So yeah, these are all things to consider when you're looking at the death rates in the past, the infant mortality rates, right? Like nutrition, cleanliness, sterility in environments, poverty. These are all impacts that these are all going to have a huge impact on the infant mortality rate.
Absolutely. And America apparently has, I think it's the second worst infant and maternal mortality rate in the built up world. But you also, in America, they have like very, very high rates of cesarean section and medical intervention. And Brazil, even worse. I think in Rio, they've got a 90% cesarean section rate.
Wow.
But if you lived there, I don't think you'd want a vaginal birth if you saw how it was run. You'd be terrified.
I mean, here in the hospitals, they always recommend cesarean, right? We know so many women who've gone to the hospital and the doctors every single time are pushing cesareans. And there's always an excuse, right? Oh, it might be breech or, you've been in labor for a few hours. So, let's get this moving. We got places to be. That they're constantly pushing this. I mean, there's a big profit motive, I'm sure. But I know a lot of women here who didn't want a cesarean, but when they went to the hospital, they pushed it and guilt tripped them into it. Like, if you don't do this, you're putting yourself in danger. You're putting your child in danger. Don't you want to live to see your child, kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's very common. We have a fear-based maternity system. It's not women-centered, and the system is with system, not with women. It works perfectly well for the system, but not the women birthing inside it. But do you know what? Right, so the NHS C-section rate is, I reckon, about 35%, and in some hospitals as high as 45%. So what, nearly 1 in 2 humans need to be born by surgery? I don't bloody think so. But in 12 years, my cesarean section rate for my clients is around 3%. So that just goes to show one thing. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a woman's pelvis in this day and age. It's nothing to do with me. They are asking questions and they're taking responsibility for their births. But I find it incredible. People will do a shit ton of research to find out about the new car they're buying or a wedding they're planning. But they don't do any research when it comes to what's going to happen to their bodies when they give birth. But I suppose if they're in a fear-based maternity system and you're going to trust the people in the white coats and go, oh, yeah, all right, I'll do that. Why are you going to ask questions? And also, the algorithms of Google and whatever, if you type in, let's say, breech birth, for example, the first thing you're going to see are guidelines saying that you have to have a cesarean, which is, of course, rubbish. Breech is a variation of normal. I've attended breech births. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I always say to women, don't confuse your body's ability with your practitioner's ability. They are two very, very different things. And if you want to do it, you do it. But unfortunately, as like now, midwives on the NHS, they don't get to have that skill of breech birth anymore. Although they've got basic training in it, they don't get to practice it because as soon as a woman's diagnosed breech, it goes straight from midwifery to consultant-led care, obstetrics. And they don't ever get to practice that art anymore because they don't see it. And as well, the doctors, I think what women really need to understand, doctors are trained for when things go wrong. How the hell can they assist in a physiological birth? If you had a room full of obstetricians and asked them to raise their hand if they've seen a natural birth, not one hand would go up. It wouldn't. It hardly happens anymore. I mean, I was talking to Beverly Beach, who I mentioned earlier, and we come to the conclusion, if you take all these procedures into account, like stretch and sweep, which they say it's not an induction, but it is, and continual fetal monitoring, everything, the rate of women in this country giving birth naturally is approaching 0.
Wow.
That's terrifying.
So, all right, when you talk about natural births, right, there are several things. We talked about cesarean section and how that's overused, chronically overused, and how women are almost gaslit into it sometimes. What about like epidurals, right? This is something, a word that you hear a lot. What are epidurals, and do you think these are possibly overutilized in the hospital situation?
Yeah. Epidurals, you can't feel what's going on in your body. You don't feel that rush of the oxytocin that's meant to be facilitating your birth and giving you those amazing feelings of, empowerment. Plus, you're on your back with an epidural, and then they put you in the lithotomy position, which means you're on your back and you've got your legs in stirrups. So you're essentially pushing uphill. You're not using gravity to bring down the baby. And do you know what's in an epidural? Fentanyl, isn't it?
Are you kidding me?
It's a drug.
I thought it was just liquid
That's what it's
science.
made of.
That's insane. They're adding they're adding fentanyl to the liquid science juice. That's how long have they been using that? What did they use before instead of it? Because that's a recent drug.
They didn't. Women just gave birth.
What?
And yeah, it's insane, but the rumors are there. I mean, our grandparents did, they gave
Yeah.
birth at home and there was no issues.
Yep.
If there was, going to hospital.
Mhm.
But that's the thing, right? So the standard service over here, they will give you the advice that, you stay at home as long as possible until your contractions are 3 minutes apart, and then you come into the hospital. And then people go, home birth? What? That's scary. What if you need to transfer? Well, aren't those two doing the same thing? You're staying at home as long as possible and then transferring in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the home birther might have a problem and then might transfer in. It's no different.
Mm-hmm.
And then during that time where they're staying at home as long as possible, there's no monitoring, there's no blood pressure being taken. And 3 minutes apart having a contraction does not mean shit. It doesn't mean to say you're in established labor where where you're over 4 centimeters. It could mean you're still in the very early stages. And they've got no monitoring. And as soon as you step through that hospital, whack, on goes a CTG machine to check the baby. They start taking your blood pressure. They start poking you, putting stuff in you. But what was the difference between you stepping in that hospital and being at home for as long as possible?
Mm-hmm.
It don't make any sense.
Well, your stress levels are
If there's a
going to
problem, of course you're going to have to seek medical attention.
be. Yeah.
Yes.
That's insane. What a stressful situation. That's completely
There's a bit of
unnecessary.
a lag now.
It does. It seems like there's quite a lag. I don't know why it does this sometimes. Yeah. So, I mean, the stress from all of this seems like it's something that's going to completely seize a woman up, possibly.
Yeah. Labours stop all the time. I had a woman in fact, I think she was my last hospital birth because I haven't done hospital birth in years because I can't stand it. But she was labouring fine at home and we went into hospital and her labour stopped because she didn't feel comfortable. The body does amazing things. It tells you you're releasing adrenaline. That means you're scared. That means you need to fight or fly. So we're going to stop this labour for you because that's what the body does. And, that's awesome. And then they're like, oh, she's failing to progress. And then they put the CTG on the baby, which, by the way, was invented for high-risk women to prevent, a huge drama. But it causes more C-sections than it prevents. And it's just standard. It's used on most people that go through the system. So they put this CTG on her. And they said the baby's heart rate is dropping. Right? Well, that's normal. It does drop during contractions, but it was going straight back up again. Also, CTGs are just an echo of the baby's heart rate. It's not real time. And the monitor can slip. Sometimes you get false readings. So in walks the obstetrician, looks at the reading and is like, right, we'll give you an induction. And I was like, right, if you're really worried about this baby's heart rate, what do you think syntocinin is going to do to that baby? Oh, no, I'm not. I'm doing. I was like, you're about as useful as a letterbox and a tombstone, aren't you? But hey, that's what you wanted to do. And this girl felt very pressured, backed into a corner, and she agreed to it. And then the baby went into distress because they gave her so much syntocinin. She weren't comfortable. She was scared. Emergency cesarean section. and then that's birth trauma. I mean,
Insane.
women walk through the system. They come in feeling really healthy, there's nothing wrong, and they leave downtrodden, disempowered, emotionally, physically scarred. I mean, my colleague, Rachel, she specializes in something called 3-step rewind. So she helps women with their birth trauma to try and overcome it so they can have another baby, or maybe not, just to help them. That shouldn't be a common thing that we offer, but it is. I wish more women would come to us before they even get pregnant. Because when you're pregnant, sometimes it's too late to be bombarded with information. You're already afeared from what the system are telling you. If you don't get induced, your baby's going to die. If this doesn't happen, you're responsible. If you don't get the vaccine, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
So they've got enough on their plate as it is. And then to be pregnant and to hear all this side of the story can be really overwhelming. So I would always suggest just do research before you're even pregnant. And there's so much fear right now. There's never been so much fear. I mean, obstetrics in general has been just a disaster. It's the lowest evidence-based medical practice there is. It's less than 9% in some trusts in this country, and in America as well. Terrible. So it was a disaster in the first place. And now all this going on, I mean, we are getting so many emails. They want me to do a PCR test. They want me to take the vaccine, blah, blah, blah. What do I do? But we educate people in human rights. We do real intensive courses on birth physiology, so you understand how your body works, to empower you, to release you from fear. And then we also educate you on the human rights aspect, as we work with a human rights expert.
Yeah, this is something I want to go deep into this and not have to self-censor at all. What I'm going to do now, guys, if you guys are watching on YouTube, we're going to cut the stream right now on YouTube, and we're going to go over there to Rockfin, where we don't have to bite our tongues. We don't have to worry about the stupid, fake, always changing terms of services and all this stuff. And we can actually speak about what we want to speak about. So if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to finish the rest of this. All right, hop on over there to Rockfin, where we are completely uncensored. It's free to make an account. It's free to watch the rest of this. Jump over there to Rockfin right now. We'll see you over there. You just pull up a tab on your browser and join us there immediately. So thank you guys for watching on YouTube. Share the video, like the video, do all that stuff. Go over there to Rockfin right now. We're going to take let me get like a 20-second, because we got a little bit of a lag time. Give it about 20 seconds, and we're going to get deep into this body autonomy, your choices, your rights in the hospital to either accept or refuse certain medical procedures that are being people think they're being forced on them, but you do have a right to say no, just like you have a right to choose where you give birth. So thank you very much, YouTube. We're out of here. Let me just ditch the YouTube stream here.